So recently, Zizaran did an interview with game designers Tavion and Andrew in regard to 3.28 Mirage League, and there's actually quite a lot of information being revealed and a lot of changes, especially in regards to player power and the Mirage mechanic itself. Some mechanics are stronger than we thought, some rewards are more controlled, and some builds are going to benefit way more than expected. But yeah, let's break this down. So the Mirage mechanic, there's actually quite a lot of cool details here that we didn't know before previously. So one of the things with the Mirage mechanics and the way it interacts with other mechanics is stuff like Ritual will give significantly more tribute, as well as Abyss having pits that can potentially open up and spew out waves of monsters and rares, kind of like POE 2 does at the moment. Most mechanics that have some sort of portal to go into another place won't actually work with inside the Mirage, except for Harvest, which opens up a portal to the Grove so you can go again. And there's also going to be a new seed within there. Although stuff like Abyssal Depths and Trials won't be found within a Mirage itself. The only actual mechanic that won't be able to be spawned in a Mirage is the Wildwood. And yes, the Mirage mechanic does work and appear in Nightmare maps, so this is a big plus, especially for juicing Nightmare maps. One of the cooler things about the Mirage mechanic I found is that there's actually ways that you can get a fully miraged map that will drop from bosses inside of a Mirage. That's going to be really cool to see, especially with the wishes that we can get. So you can potentially get like a Soul Eater for a whole map, or potentially become completely invulnerable for a whole map, or even like buff your rewards for the whole map. So that mechanic in itself is going to be really cool. Obviously it is dependent on if you get the boss within the Mirage. Maybe there's ways to manipulate that in some sort of ways. Maybe the Maven mechanic might help you as well in order for it to like drop extra bosses within a Mirage, and then that way you can get more of a chance to get these Mirage maps. So I am curious to see how often we will get these. And obviously it's also really cool that there's bosses like Cyrus that can randomly spawn within the Mirage, and they're just those exact bosses, obviously not on uber difficulty, but they will drop the same loot table that they have on their normal modes. So that's really cool. So our randomized bosses can appear and should make it more interesting for sure. Definitely overall like the way that this is headed, and the way that it's seeming like on paper at least. Seems like less of a gimmick. There definitely seems like a lot of multiplayer systems, especially with how we're going to be able to play our other league mechanics combined with the Astrolabes. So yeah, the overall Mirage mechanic seems super fun, and those Mirage maps, you know, getting the right wishes is going to make it super enjoyable. Now let's talk about player power and imbued gems. So the first things to note is that the new belt that drops from the Mirage boss will have one offensive shrine buff and one defensive shrine buff. Important to note that they've also stated that this is not divinable, so you cannot change these shrine buffs with a divine. I think this is a very good idea and a good concept, just because whatever you drop, either it's good or it's not so good, and you can't really change it. Next, they have confirmed that imbued gems will only be able to be equipped on one item slot. So you can only have one gem per item slot. So one only on your chest, one maximum on your gloves, feet, helm, that sort of stuff. Now, obviously we know that the imbued gems are going to benefit attack builds a lot more because they care less about gem levels. And if you don't know, it is obviously competing with Val gems and gemming your item or your gem to level 21. So usually spell builds would want to go more for spell gem level stuff, whereas attack builds care less about it. And obviously with imbued gems there's also an RNG factor to it, so you're not always going to get the level 1 support that you want from it, but in turn it should be something like a 7 link when you're playing an attack build, and it should give you more damage than you would if you were to just try get a level 21 version of that gem. Now, their philosophy around sort of the temporary permanent power within the league, they've said there's nothing specific within the league that gives you that. Obviously stuff like imbued gems will definitely help and contribute to that, but obviously that's not going to be for every single build. The idea is for other mechanics to sort of have the extra player power now. So like for example, you've got the new ultimatums that spawn in the Mirage that give you a reward of your prefix or suffix buffs, or you can get a new essence, and that looks really cool. It gives you like a +6 level to gem on your gloves if it's the only gem on there. So stuff like this will add to the player power, and like all these other previous league mechanics will start giving you better stuff. They're within a Mirage. The Mirage itself and the mechanic itself is not going to provide any temporary player power. Next, let's talk about skill balance. Now, there's been some really wild stuff said about skill balance, especially with obviously the new holy skills that are coming. So we know that they're sort of doing balance changes currently around those. One of the things that they mentioned is whenever they do release a new skill, they typically try to make it a bit overpowered intentionally so that obviously people will play it. Now, that has been the case, and we knew it from last league as well, because we had stuff like Kinetic Fusillade that came in last league. It's actually still kind of overpowered, and a lot of people will play as a league starter, but obviously that's not getting nerfed. They also said that they're very hesitant to change early leveling meta stuff and gems just because they feel like players will have a comfortability level with using those skills and they don't want to change that comfortability. But I feel kind of the opposite, to be fair. I think that they need to be changing the meta more regularly and changing the skills around and what's good and what's not, and buffing underused skills, just because it gives people more of a fresh feeling that they're playing like a completely new league with a completely new changes. Like, you don't want your early game to always feel the same because you're always playing the same skills, for example. But hey, that's just my thoughts on that. They also did say that there's going to be no mid-league gem changes, so they're going to try and avoid doing any balance changes mid-league, which we kind of already knew. Also around exceptional gems, one of the things that they pointed out is stuff like GMP, which has an awakened version but it's getting removed, won't actually have an exceptional version, and that's because they want to make it so exceptional gems are more transformative rather than just buff to numbers and that sort of stuff. So like for GMP, the example they gave is even if they were to have an extra projectile, they don't think that matches that criteria of making it more transformative, which is fair enough. But they did say they're going to add exceptional gems for chain and hook. As to what they do yet, still unknown. And in terms of guard skills, they said they won't be buffing them because they feel like stuff like armor over time has been buffed slowly, so that they don't feel like they need to buff Molten Shell and all these guard skill abilities, etc. My overall thoughts about the balance stuff, like I said, I still feel like they need to change the early meta leveling stuff. Like, it gets a bit stale and boring pretty fast. I hope they do this next league at least. In terms of the new skills, like the holy skills, yeah, they look cool. They're probably going to be busted. I'm sure people, are going to be playing some sort of absolution hunters, and it's going to be like really good. So yeah, not a surprise that they intentionally make those kind of a bit busted at the start and overpowered, but definitely some sleeper starters with those holy skills, so do keep an eye on those. Some changes to the economy and drop changes that you kind of want to be familiar with is resonators and fossils will now only drop from Delve. Obviously this makes it so that they're going to be more rare, and that means there's going to be less of them in the market, and they're probably going to increase in price. As to how much, we don't really know. Also, stuff like Chaos, Exalt and Abnormal Orbs are going to be more common. Obviously Abnormal Orbs are joining the core drop pool, so you'll be able to find them from anywhere now. Stuff like Scarabs and that sort of stuff is not being doubled, that being kept the exact same. Obviously stuff like mirrors are being slightly higher rate drop chance, but obviously not getting doubled, so you probably still won't see one. Stuff like memory stand items will drop more often, and sort of Astrolabe farming synergies with Maven multi-bosses will make it so hopefully Astrolabes, if you are intending to buy them, won't be too expensive. But yeah, looks like obviously good changes to the ground loot stuff with the Chaos and Exalts dropping more often. Who knows, maybe we'll end up seeing Exalts being the main trading currency instead of Chaos, which it is at the moment. It just depends on the weight or drops of each of these items and currencies. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. I think it is headed in the right direction. In terms of the memory stand items dropping more often, I just wish that we'll get tiered loot, and that'd be probably better, like POE 2 system for example. For me, I think that would be just way better than having loads of items dropping and none of them really mattering. for the most part. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what kind of impact especially those Chaos Exalt and Annul changes have on the league. Finally, let's talk about the Reliquarian Ascendancy. So now we have the actual full list of all the points, all the sort of unique items that we can point for this. So the one thing to note here is obviously it's very similar to the Ascendant, where the first lab won't really give you anything except passive skill points, so you won't see a power spike until full lab. One thing to note about the structure of this Ascendancy is obviously your crew lab points will mainly be for uniques around armor types, so stuff like chest armors, boots, that sort of stuff. Then the other two on the outer layers are going to be related to weapon stuff. And then the final one on the right side is going to be more related to jewelries and jewels. And also one other thing to note, you can actually use the actual unique with the point itself. And now if you start looking at some of these, you'll see, like, for example, the Brass Dome unique point that you have that gives you a +3 maximum to elemental resistances. You can also actually wear the chest armor on top of this point, and it'll give you potentially up to a maximum of 8 maximum elemental resistances. There is also some other really cool ones that I'm going to point out. So stuff like the Terminus Est for the weapon point that you can put in. This is actually really cool because it enables and helps with the flicker builds. So I'm sure people that are playing flicker are going to be really happy with that one. There's also stuff like Widow Hailed, which is cool. It's giving you a 75% bonus. Obviously with the unique on top, you can get another 250%. So in total, you can get 325% bonuses from Equipped Mirror. Really cool one over there. Then you have stuff like the Sacred Wisp one that gives you 2 extra Sacred Wisp. I'm sure some casters and one players would like that. There's also the Jack the Axe point, which grants you a level 30 Thirst for Blood skill. Now usually we don't see a level 31 on the actual weapon itself. You'll see a level 21, so it'll be interesting to see what changes the 31 has, the level 31. You know, at the moment you have a 20% more damage with bleeding. I'm guessing that's probably going to be increased to probably 30%, maybe more. We'll have to wait and see with the numbers on that one. The Mystic Refractor is kind of nice for builds that actually don't have projectiles that don't go through walls or swing back from walls or bounce back from walls. So stuff like Forbidden Right would be really cool with that. There's a Replica Heartbreaker one, which has 60% chance to impale on spell hit. Now the normal weapon itself will give you 20% chance, and you can have 2 of them. So in total, you can end up getting 100% impale spell hit, which, you know, we haven't seen any builds for it yet, but maybe people will come up with stuff for that. That's cool. Similar sort of thing with the totem, the Cardigan's Authority one. So you get +3 maximum number of totems, but you cannot have more than 2 totems of the same type. Now usually we don't really see this, so it'll be interesting to see if someone can find a way to have different totem types and utilize this in some way. And Burden of Shadows is actually really cool. It's normally from a 2-handed staff, of course. Now you can just get it and you can use your Wrath-based robe with that. So yeah, some interesting build unities there with that one as well. And then for the jewelry stuff, there's some nice ones here. You obviously have the Tier of Purity that grants you a level 30 Purity of Skill, Purity of Element skill. That's really cool. Obviously that's going to give you a ton of resistances and probably good for like early game and that sort of stuff. You also have your Astromentus, which black gives you 60 attributes. Now this is really nice, especially for attribute stackers later on. There's some cool ones around Prospero's Protection that gives you armor from Energy Shield that gets doubled and 10% block chance damage. And then obviously the Burden of Truth is pretty good defensive wise, as it gains you 10% of your maximum life as extra energy shield. Overall, I'm like excited. Some of these points are really nice, some of them are kind of weak and decent for leveling, but obviously these are going to be changing every single league and rotating, so it'll be interesting to see what actually happens with those. One other thing to note is you can actually use your forbidden jewels from the Ascendant with this Ascendancy, but because it's changing every league, it won't have its own forbidden flame and flesh jewels. But yeah, overall very happy with them. Yeah, excited. It's like another thing from each league that we're gonna get from now on, where we'll have changes to this Ascendancy, and it's something else to look forward to. And eventually I'll find a build where I can play this Ascendancy. Overall, I'm very excited for this league, especially after hearing this interview. I'm even more excited, especially with the different sort of layering that we're getting with the league and all the other cool stuff that's coming with the way that it interacts with mechanics, the sort of surprises that you get that it you know, a Cyrus boss can just randomly spawn, and then other stuff like the whole map being a Mirage map, and you could potentially just get Soul Eater and just, yeah, that's going to be so fun to run on its own. So it's not just like a side mechanic, it is very much a multiplayer system, especially with the way it interacts with those other mechanics. And yeah, stuff like Reliquarian obviously is very nice to have. It's gonna be cool seeing it change every league. And one of the bigger ones that I think people are sleeping on is obviously the economy changes. The changes to like the Delve fossils only dropping from Delve now. Obviously it's going to be more expensive, but we're also getting more currency drops in general, hopefully. So stuff like your Exalted, your Unknown Orbs, and your Chaos Orbs. So yeah, I'm excited for it, looking forward to it. I think there will be another interview in the next few days. I'll try posting a video once that's out. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think.